Hello, everyone, and welcome to the latest episode of the Nordic Football Podcast. I'm Steve Wyss, and I'm joined, as ever, by my good friend Jonathan Fadugba. So, we are well into the start of the Eliteserien and Allsvenskan seasons, a couple of rounds old. We've just about got our breath back from the, 8 hours of content that we've produced over a certain period of time, Jonathan. How are you feeling? And your general thoughts on the return to football in Scandinavia, Norway and Sweden?
Hi, Steve. Hi, everybody. Yeah, it's been a nice week. I'm okay. How are you?
I'm doing okay. I've been away in Scotland this weekend, of all places. So, I've just got back yesterday, and thankfully got back in time to watch the Eliteserien games. But yeah, I'm doing okay.
How was your weekend in Scotland?
Well, I was actually up there on a stag do. In Edinburgh. Actually took in a game of football on the Saturday in Scottish League One. Falkirk against Cove Rangers, which was an interesting experience, Jonathan. But on the old 4G pitch there at Falkirk. So, I was a little heavy-headed on Saturday morning. But you know me. Tough warrior, battle through things.
Indeed. So you got a bit of a sore head, or are you feeling fine?
I'm fine now. I mean, I had a bit of a sore head, over the weekend. I'm not a spring chicken anymore, but still made a fairly stern stuff.
Lovely to see. Yeah, it's been an interesting week, isn't it? We've got a big show for you today. We've got a lot of listener questions as well. So thank you to everybody who's listened. I hope you've really enjoyed the season previews. Obviously, if you haven't listened to the season preview, they're free to listen to or wherever you get your podcasts, YouTube, Spotify, iTunes, wherever you go. And you can follow us on Twitter at Nordic Footpod to get the links, of course, as always. They're still relevant. They're only a week old. And, of course, we preview every single team in the league with a little bit of analysis of every single team and our predictions for where they will finish in the season. And, of course, over on our Patreon, patreon.com/Nordic Football Podcast, you can access our 10 to watch in Allsvenskan and 10 to watch in Eliteserien. So that's 20 hot talents to keep an eye out for this year. We've picked some really interesting players, haven't we, Steve? And start of this season, a couple of them are doing fairly well already. So, I think that's something if you want to get. And, of course, we've got our weekend previews as well. We started the season with an 88% hit rate out of 9 predictions. We've got 8 of them right so far. So that's a pretty good success rate so far in terms of our weekend predictions. You can grab them as well on Patreon. So grab all that stuff if you like. But for now, we're going to recap the first 2 weeks of the season in Allsvenskan and Eliteserien. And there's only one place to start, my friend, because there's a big midweek game coming up this week. It is the Conference League, and it's Bodø Glimt against our old friends Roma, isn't it? AS Roma. And I want to get your take on it first of all. I mean, I don't know if you want to start by telling us how Glimt got on this past weekend, but it's probably the best place to start, isn't it? Because that's a very big game.
Yes. Almost I feel like I've not really talked enough about this game. Bodø Glimt 2, Roma 1 in the first leg of the quarterfinals of the Europa Conference League. And Roma took the lead in this match. Pellegrino with a good finish. I have to say, he looked quite good, that lad, for Roma, Pellegrino. I think he's got quite a few Italian caps, but he definitely stood out to me there. And to be honest, I was getting a little bit worried for Glimt. They weren't quite themselves. And, I was thinking, this is the third time Jose Mourinho's faced them. He may have finally worked them out. But incredibly, there's no stopping this Glimt side, is there? Bryce Wembangoma, of all people, equalised. That was a popular goal. And then right at the end, I think 88th, 89th minute, Hugo Vettelsson with a deflected header into the back of the net, and Bodø Glimt took the win 2-1, and they're going to Roma with that advantage. But really, the main talking point here is more off the pitch, with a big scuffle after the game, which we're going to talk about soon. But in terms of performance on the field, I think it was a great second half display from Glimt. Knutsen made some great tactical changes. He got the subs right at the right time, and the heart of this team is unquestionable. And if they can avoid defeat at Olympico, they are into the semi-finals against either Leicester or PSV.
I mean, that's a huge achievement, and caused a big scene in Glimt. The fact that they turned it around, a really good result for them. Not quite 6-1, but of course, second time they've played them. I mean, how much, firstly, Steve, do you think that impacted them? The fact that they've already played each other. Was it a disappointment going into the match, if you know what I mean, with the other teams that could have maybe drawn? Was it seen as a bad draw, or was it maybe a good draw actually to be able to play someone you've already known and already absolutely battered in the home leg? What was the sort of feeling around the game before it? With the odds and things like that. Did people expect them to win again, or and what was the perception within the club as well around that match?
I think it's both a poor draw but a good draw as well. I mean, if you look at the section of this Conference League draw, and they've no doubt they are in the hardest bit. I say the winner of this tie faces Leicester or PSV Eindhoven. In the other section, it's Marseille, PAOK, Feyenoord or Slavia Prague. Now, I'm pretty confident Marseille are pretty booked in for the final, really. They should be in that section. But at the end of the day, you kind of want a bit of a glamour tie, don't you, as well? So they could have got someone like PAOK or Slavia Prague who they might have got beaten by them, and it would have felt pretty a tame finish to things in this competition for them. At least they know Roma. They played them twice. I mean, Roma know them as well, so that's kind of a disadvantage. But it's a big tie. They're going to get to play in front of a full house at Olympico in the second leg. All tickets are sell out, all tickets sold. So, I mean, I think overall I think it is probably a good draw. It's a shame they've got to face them at this stage again. But I mean, in terms of expectations, they beat them 6-1 up in the group stage. So I think there was there was certainly optimism. I don't know whether it was expectation, but certainly optimism. And why wouldn't they after the first two performances they had?
Yeah, certainly. And they go to Roma now this week, as we said. It's a big preview. One of the biggest games in Europe, really, isn't it, this week? What's the outlook? I mean, from what I've read this week, it's kind of kicked off, hasn't it? Because post-match, there was a little bit of spice. I mean, can you tell us exactly what happened after the game? Because it's a little bit curious to see what happened. There's been a lot of comments back and forth, both teams. I know Bodø Glimt put out a club statement on their website. So what exactly went on after this game, Steve?
In the player tunnel after the match, Roma's goalkeeping coach, Nuno Santos, is said to have strangled Kjetil Knutsen. And the Glimt coach responded by basically putting the Portuguese guy on the ground. So that's what Glimt claim.
Strangled him for what reason? Was there was there controversy during the match? Or, I mean, it's rare that you randomly go up and try and strangle someone. What was the reason for it? Do you know why?
Yeah. Well, basically, all match, this goalkeeping coach, Nuno Santos, had been trying to badger the Bodø Glimt bench and basically antagonize them, abuse them, saying loads of shit, stuff like that. And, that was obviously something that was annoying Glimt and so on and so forth. But things came to a head after the game when, he got him by the throat, according to Glimt. And then that is when Kjetil Knutsen reacted, self-defense. That's what he's claiming. However, the Italian side of things has been said that, the captain, Pellegrini, said that it was Knutsen who attacked the goalkeeping coach first. So there's talk that there is actually a video of this somewhere, but it hasn't been made public. But there's a big fallout here because Kjetil Knutsen said this whole incident has given him a lot to consider. And he told Avisa Nordland, "It's on a level that I considered whether I should continue with this. It is so far from my club and Norwegian football's values. You have to get in and gather strength in yourself to solve the situation in the best possible way. Such things can make me want to do something completely different. For me, the most important thing is to be able to see myself in the mirror. I have to consider if it's actually worth it. This game costs a lot." And he said about Mourinho here, I'm just checking, he made a specific comment on Mourinho. "This kind of attitude is shocking from him. His values and his way of coaching are so far off everything I stand for. It is incredibly disappointing to see such behaviour from a great manager who's been part of this game for so long." So Knutsen basically said he thought about quitting football after the incident on Thursday. So At the minute, he's under investigation from UEFA. He's suspended at this point in time for the second leg, as is the goalkeeping coach, until the inquiry is all over. So I don't know how quickly this is going to be processed. But at the minute, Kjetil Knutsen will not be on the sidelines for the second leg in Rome.
I mean, these are big words, Steve, from the actual from Kjetil Knutsen. To say that he's thinking about quitting football, I thought you maybe meant he was just thinking of maybe not turning up for this next match or for not addressing the Roma game. Does he really mean quit football, or how badly is he being affected by that? How badly is the club been affected by that? And how do you think it might affect the second leg coming? I mean, you mentioned there's an appeal. Maybe do you think he might even think to himself, what? Either way, I'm not bothering being on the touchline, for example, or not going to Rome. What? It sounds like quite a big incident, to be honest.
I tell you what's happened here, right, Jonathan? For me, it comes down to Jose Mourinho, who has basically become an absolute wanker, in my opinion, these days. Now, I enjoyed Mourinho when he first came into English football, and you can't deny he had a fantastic decade of success. But what he's become now, he's been found out on a lot of levels at clubs that he's failed with in recent times. And he has become this bitter guy who he's a bad loser. He cannot win with dignity. And he's basically been outcoached by Knutsen, and he's resorted to the dark arts and low blows to try and rattle Bodø Glimt, basically. The way he runs his ship is he would have told, and this is my opinion, he would have told his coaches to basically get in their ear, try and distract them, try and destabilize them. And he may well have even said, go for the throat, quite literally. And this is the way he goes about stuff in football nowadays. There was on Sunday, I think they played against the bottom team in Italy. I think Salernitana. They've only won 3 games all year. They're going down. So apparently someone from the Roma bench was basically berating Salernitana, goading them that, you're going down. That is typical Mourinho and his staff. He actually apologized for it, I think, on behalf of the club. But come on, they just don't have any class about them sometimes. He will do, and Knutsen mentioned this, he will basically do whatever it takes to get a result. He doesn't care how. And that is Jose Mourinho for you. I've never been a fan of him. Certainly not in the last 10 years anyway. And that's how I see things going. Basically, he was getting out coached by Glimt. He didn't like it. He spat his dummy out, and he's thinking of ways to try and turn it into his advantage. Yeah,
I mean, he does have previous for this. When just what you're saying there reminds me of the classic sort of Real Madrid-Barca games where he used to really antagonize Barcelona. Obviously, the late Tito Villanova, who can remember that, the poke in the eye and the kind of the atmosphere he created in those games to really stir up that Barcelona team, which in the end, to be fair to him, it was successful. He did rattle what is one of the greatest probably teams of all time, that Barca side, and did win the league. So, he is someone who likes to delve into these dark arts, isn't he? I mean, as you've mentioned there, he's probably thought to himself, listen, I can rattle this Bodø Glimt team. They've probably never seen this sort of stuff before. Do you feel that because you mentioned it was the goalkeeping coach, do you feel that the goalkeeping coach was doing this under instruction then? Or do you feel that it was, as a tactic to maybe just sort of deflect the tension away from Glimt and just get them out of their comfort zone? Because this is sort of thing that you don't see this much in Norway, do you? In Norwegian football?
No, definitely not at all. Look, I'll tell you, like I said, this is the way that Mourinho captains his ship. Anyone under him has got to be singing from the same hymn sheet. This goalkeeping coach was under him at Spurs. So he knows, obviously, he's been working with Mourinho. And, as I said, they're all probably of the same sort of principles and values and things like that. So whether Mourinho directed him specifically to do this, I'm not sure. But they're going to be all of the same ilk, in my opinion, that they know that they have to try and do. There would have been a tactic to try and rattle them, do the mind games and things like that. I mean, it's astonishing. This is Roma. To do this against a team called Bodø Glimt. It's almost embarrassing that they've resorted to this level. But look, if that's how you're going to do it, I just don't think Mourinho's got any integrity now. I'm not sure he ever really did in that way. I mean, it's not my sort of thing. Like how Fergie used to do mind games for Man United. I think some of that was fair play, really. It never really seemed to go below the belt that often. I think Mourinho definitely does. to be honest with you, Jonathan. And, now, there's the controversy. They moaned about the pitch up in Glimt, being artificial. And it's interesting that just in the last day or two, that Bodø Glimt wanted to train on grass in Italy. Roma offered them their artificial training facility to train on instead of any grass. So now Lazio have stepped in and made available their training facility in a place called Formello, where it's made available, where they've basically made all this training facility available free of charge for Glimt. So now Lazio are involved in this. It's really kicked off. It's got heated. I can't believe what's happened. And it's going to be a sellout crowd in Olympico. And you know what? In a true Kevin Keegan voice, I would love it. I would love it if Roma got knocked out now. I really would.
Yeah, it's certainly going to stir them up. The interesting thing is this could actually work, couldn't it? Because Glimt, they've never had to probably deal with this before. How will it affect them mentally into going to the game, the players and that kind of thing? Do you think they can actually withstand this? And how do you think it, impacts this match coming up? And just give us your general thoughts. It's Thursday, 8 p.m. in the UK. Roma are at Stadio Olimpico, home to Glimt, 2-1 down, obviously. How do you think it's going to affect the game, and where do you see the game going from here?
I think it's going to be really, really hard. It's one of the hardest places to go in football when their fans are real heckled up and really stirred. And the atmosphere is going to be, I think, probably electric, and it'll be quite poisonous towards Glimt. There'll be a lot of police there and stuff now. Things have kicked off and spicy. It's going to be a huge challenge for Bodø Glimt, especially if their manager's not on the sideline. They've got injury problems at the weekend. They lost Pellegrino and Breda Mu they're doubtful for this game, match against Sandefjord, which ironically Bodø Glimt were moaning about the pitch there, which led to several. It was a brutal match, actually. The Sandefjord captains ruled out for the whole season with an ACL as a result of that game. But so they've got injury doubts. The manager might not be on the sidelines. If they come through this, I think, I might buy a Bodø Glimt shirt with Mourinho on the back or something. Genuinely, it would be a great achievement to get through the semi-finals now with so many things against them. It might make them. I do not underestimate this Glimt side in terms of its togetherness and strong heart and desire. But something tells me Roma now will do what is needed to get through, no matter how ugly, no matter how below the belt. They'll cheat. They'll do anything in their power now to get what they need. And, they don't care what level they stoop to. It's about, for Roma, Mourinho, it's now about getting in that hat for the semi-final at all costs.
Yeah, I'm going to ask you for your match prediction in a second. I'm just going to read some of Mourinho's comments. Obviously, Lorenzo Pellegrini, who you mentioned in the match, he actually came out afterwards and said he was surprised about it, just given the Roma side of things. He said he wasn't, it goes against their values. Mourinho, after the Salernitana game, used it to mock Bodø Glimt, saying, "We are civilized people. Nobody will be waiting to punch someone in the face." He said as well, "I tell the truth, not like some clubs or the police. Someone on my bench told the Salernitana staff they're going to Serie B, and I went to apologize." Mourinho then said, "We are civilized people. What happens on the field ends there. Nobody will be waiting outside 45 minutes later to try and punch someone in the face." So clearly, clearly Mourinho, obviously, you're just giving that side of the story. Clearly, there's bad blood between these two teams. He's using it to have a dig at Glimt. This is out of the classic Mourinho playbook, as you've said. Ferguson used to enjoy these mind games, but I can't remember him ever having punch-ups with managers. I think he was quite civil in that sense and quite humble in defeat most of the time, even if it might go against the ref or something like that, but never really went against managers. Just a little bit extra comment, on BT Sport. James Horncastle commented, "When you think that 3 of the goal scorers from the 6-1 defeat have since been sold, to still lose to Bodø Glimt is humiliating," criticising Mourinho there. So this is it's turned into some sort of grudge match somehow. So yeah, like you said, there's going to be a lot of bad blood. What is your prediction for this game, Steve? I know you've already said, you've outlined the conditions, but what do you think will happen? What's your match prediction, just briefly?
I'm going to predict 2-1 after 90 minutes to Roma, which will, of course, take it to extra time. and then anything's possible. I feel like this tie almost deserves to end in a penalty shootout. Yes, it just feels that way to me, and who knows which way it will go. I don't know. I'm honestly going to sit on the fence here. I mean, something tells me this might be just a step too far for Glimt, but I've said that many times before. Mourinho, you're right. It's typical Mourinho, is this, and for me, he's done as a top level coach now. He's finished. He's not an elite level coach anymore. He was.
Yeah, I mean, let's leave that, because obviously, you know, I don't know where they are in Serie A, but it's not really our place to kind of. It's not really our place to comment on that, really, is it?
My point is that I think Knutsen has outcoached him.
Right. Okay.
Over the 3 matches so far. Whether he can keep doing that, I don't know.
What you're saying, yeah.
So I think Glimt will give it their absolute all. I'll say Roma on penalties, and it'll be a horrible way to go out. But I hope it's the other way around. Yeah,
and we obviously wish good luck to Bodø Glimt. You know, we don't want it to end in this kind of nasty situation. And I really hope, obviously, reading Kjetil Knutsen's comments, you know, the last thing I want is for him to step away from football, because, you know, he's been incredible for this past few years. He's been a breath of fresh air for football in general, I think. So that, you know, let's hope that he recovers from this. Let's hope he's not too badly affected. And, you know, it's not a nice spirit, is it? The game is not a nice atmosphere. So let's hope that he can get over it, and everyone moves on in an amicable way. Let's look at the weekend's games. Obviously, Glimt, you know, they got a win at Sandefjord. I mean, I don't know if you want to touch on that briefly, or you want to move on to the teams who've got 100% records. You know, what stood out for you in this second game week?
Yeah, I mean, that match, as I could say, it was a brutal game injury-wise. Pellegrino went down, Breda Mu went down. Sander Foss, the Sandefjord captain's ruled out for the whole season now with an ACL injury. He didn't blame. It was a collision with Runar Espejord. He didn't blame Espejord, though. Several players came out and called this pitch an absolute disgrace, and it was. And honestly, I mean, for me personally, I think all of Norway, you may as well have the pitches artificial. I think you play better football on it. I think there's actually less risk of injuries now in the modern day pitches that are artificial as well, because there was bare patches and everything here at Sandefjord. It's not their fault. I've said before. I know we've had this debate on the podcast, but it's not their fault. The conditions up there over the course of the calendar year, it's difficult after a winter to get a good surface. But Glimt won it 2-1. They got the result. An important win, actually, because it's they needed to win at least one of the first two games. There are two teams on 100%, Viking and Molde. So a really good start for them. Viking have won both games 1-0, and Molde came from behind to beat Godset 3-1, vanquishing the ghost of the last year's 6-0 defeat. So we've got two teams on 100%. Three teams have yet to pick up a point, and the rest are all in between.
Yeah, I mean, we haven't also touched on week one, so I'm just going to read the week one results briefly. Hamkam 2, Lillestrøm 2, Molde 1, Vålerenga 0, Arlesund 1, Kristiansund 0, Haugesund 1, Sandefjord 3. Jerv got their first ever win in the top flight in their first match, obviously 1-0 against Strøm's Godset. Odd beat Tromsø 2-0. Salzburg lost at home 0-1 to Viking, and Glimt and Rosenborg in the big game. That big clash, opening season clash, 2-2 it finished. Then in the second round of games, also just quickly read through all of them. Lillestrøm beat Jerv 4-0 on the Saturday. Kristiansund 2, Salzburg 3, Rosenborg 1, Odd 0. One of your predictions, wasn't that? Sandefjord 1, Bodø Glimt 2, which we've just mentioned. Godset 1, Molde 3, Tromsø 2, Hamkam, newly promoted Hamkam 1, Vålerenga 2, Haugesund 1, and Viking 1, Arlesund, newly promoted Arlesund 0. Sorry for any mispronunciations there. So you're saying that Sandefjord play on a grass surface, Steve?
Yeah, there's not many teams that do play on a grass surface in the Eliteserien now. Lillestrøm, Rosenborg, Sandefjord, Jerv, and Haugesund. They're the only teams that play on grass surfaces now. And I've got to be honest, all of them, apart from Rosenborg and probably Lillestrøm when the summer starts to come, or the rest of them are pretty shocking surfaces, to be honest, most of the whole year round. To be fair, I can't really comment on Jerv yet. I've not seen it throughout the whole season, but I just honestly feel that we get better football in the artificial grounds, pitches now, and so many players are used to it these days that this early in the year, you don't want to be on a grass pitch, in my opinion. You'd rather be on artificial.
Yeah, definitely. And we got a question from Soccer Noob USA. I think we're gonna do a little section, aren't we, in a bit on questions. We've had a lot this week, so thank you so much for everyone who's dropped questions on Twitter at Nordic Footpod. But at Soccer Noob USA, just because we've been talking about Glimt, he asked, "Do you think Bodø Glimt can hold off Roma? And if so, how far do you think they can go?" Kind of already answered that. I think you think they're going to go out in this round. So yeah, thanks so much for that question, Soccer Noob USA. Keep them coming. Hopefully, we've had a big section there discussing that game, so hopefully that gives you an answer that you want. And please do, in future, ask more questions every week because we'll be happy to answer them. Molde and Viking, 100% record, Steve. Yeah. What's your take on these two teams so far? Looking quite good.
I think Molde, they're pretty exactly what we all expected. They're creating loads of chances. They probably should be scoring even more goals than they have. But at the same time, at the other end, they will give you some opportunities here and there. It's a question of taking them. And the opposition haven't really taken their chances against them yet this season. And there will come a match where they find themselves a couple of goals down. And then how are they going to respond? And it'll be interesting. Or, the opposition are much more clinical. They actually fell behind in this game to a Fred Friday header, and they were down at half time. So I think fair play to them to come back into the match second half. And they definitely showed good patience and they didn't panic. I quite liked that about Molde. Viking, a more interesting case because the last couple of seasons, they've been this sort of pinball team, end-to-end football, like basketball games, where they just outscoring sides left, right, and centre, and that is how they were getting their results and points. There's something different about Viking this season. They're controlling matches actually a lot better than I expected. Their XG against is really good, I think, right now. They've really limited their sides. I mean, Sarpsborg and Arlesund, who are no mugs really. They're not top sides either, but I've been impressed how Viking have controlled games. They've been willing to be more patient, and they've scored both their goals late in matches. Is it a different sort of style of Viking where they've looked at themselves the last 2 years and thinking, we're conceding too many goals here. We're too, not panic stations, but we're too eager to just go forward, bomb forward. And I've seen it leads under Bielsa. Matches can become crazy. And I think if we see this level of control from Viking continue, they're actually a dark horse even for the gold medal, Jonathan, I must say.
It's a big statement. I mean, you got them fourth place in your preseason preview, obviously, preseason preview podcast. Don't forget to grab it, everyone. But yeah, you're even maybe tipping them after a positive start. They're the only two teams in the league with a 100% record, of course. So well done to them at the beginning of this campaign. But let's move on to, I don't know if you have any further comments, but if you don't, then let's move on. I think
there's a lot of questions. The question section was quite a few about Rosenborg, so we'll do that at the end.
Yeah.
But I think we're going to talk about sort of down the
let's
bottom
move on
now.
To the promoted teams. We'll talk about those listener questions and we'll sort of review a little bit. There's a few more questions on there about the top.
Yeah.
But,
yeah.
Every promoted side in the league has at least a point so far.
Yes, they do. And we've got Arsenal on 3, Jerv on 3, and HamKam have 1. And so far, I've been quite impressed, actually, with the promoted teams. Jerv have ground out. They were lucky to beat Godset, but you can't knock a team for defending well and then taking their chance. And they lost 4-0 at Lillestrøm in week 2, but really, it wasn't that bad a display. I mean, Lillestrøm just showed their extra class of someone like Paul-Andre Helland, and they did that in week 1 against HamKam as well. So I think fair play to Jerv and Arlesund. Definitely as solid as I thought they would be. I said in the season preview podcast that they will this time escape relegation. And Lars-Arne Nielsen has got a good setup going there. He's happy to dig out and play ugly if needed. A 1-0 win against Kristiansund. And you know what? It only took a very good finish from Zlatko Tripic against Viking. Otherwise, they may have even held out for a 0-0 there. So far, I've been impressed with what I've seen from all 3 teams. HamKam will probably feel they should have 3 points on the board after week 1. They let slip a 2-0 lead against Lillestrøm, then got beat at Tromsø. That can happen. It's a tough place to go. But so far, it's encouraging for the promoted teams.
From a fantasy point of view, I know there's a lot of people playing Eliteserien Fantasy this season. And our league, we've got a good amount of people in that league. I think 150 people in our Nordic Football Pod League. if you haven't joined it. And I'm actually not bottom at the start of the season, which is great to see. I'm sort of mid-table, which I'm loving. Of the promoted sides, who are the kind of maybe differentials, the outliers that you've, who are the players that have kind of started well, not just from an FPL perspective, but in terms of these three teams getting points on the board, who are the players maybe that have sort of started the season quite well in those three teams?
I don't think I would quite have the guts to put a Yerv player in my starting lineup. But Ålesund are an interesting side to look at because they've got Tromsø now next at home. And then they actually have a double game week, which has been brought forward. They play Odd away and then Lillestrøm away, same game week in round 4. Now, those are not easy games, but Ålesund have got some. I think you could actually look at certainly Simon Nordley for 7.5 million, who takes pretty much all the set pieces. He's already got an assist. He very nearly scored against Viking, first half, hit the post. Everyone's probably still waiting for Sigurd Hagen to score goals. He's owned by over 20% of people. But the goals will come, I think, against the right sort of team. But I think the defence is worth looking at as well, Jonathan, because they've only conceded 1 in 2 matches. So you could certainly look at someone like the captain, David Follman, or even Simon Raffen, although Jeppe Moe might come back from injury there. I think Ålesund are a squad worth looking at. And in terms of Ham Cam, I mentioned Christian Eriksen in the preseason podcast, how I was kind of a bit dubious of him. He had a fantastic first game against Lillestrøm, less effective against Tromsø, but if he plays like that at home again, then 7.1 million now on him might look like a good price. So you could definitely look at Ålesund and Ham Cam, certainly. And as for Yerv, as I said, I wouldn't really look at anyone there yet, although Furtado did score in that first game against Godset and got a few extra points.
Fantastic stuff. We got Ålesund against Tromsø this week. Next week it's a Monday games. All the games on Monday, 18th of April. And in our preseason, in our sort of weekend preview, we'll have a couple of tips there as well. We'll preview the weekend's games. A short extra episode that we always do on our Patreon. So patreon.com/Nordic Football Podcast if you fancy getting involved with that. But Ham Cam have Sandefjord as well at home, and Jerv will play Kristiansund at home. We've started quite poorly, Kristiansund, my boys. Not doing very well at the moment with 0 points. Before we wrap up part 1, just want to ask you, I do want to ask you about my boys actually. Kristiansund, are they in trouble? Because we've got 3 teams on the bottom with 0 points. Kristiansund, Haugesund, who I also used to like when they had Bruno Leite, and Stroms Godset, who you did tip to have a poor season the previous year, but you thought this year they'd recover a bit, but obviously they've made quite a bad start, haven't they, Steve?
Yeah, I mean, we've got a question about Haugesund. We'll go about them soon. Godset, one of the defeats is against Molde, so we'll probably let them off for that, won't we? As for Kristiansund, they might be in some trouble, Jonathan. I have to say, they lost to Ålesund and hardly laid a glove on them. And then against Sarpsborg, I mean, they conceded after, I think, 18 seconds or something like that against them. And they were 3-0 down at half-time. Came back into the game in the second half. That was more the Kristiansund that we know and love, let's say. But the damage had been done. And to start with 2 defeats against Ålesund and Sarpsborg, it's not great. They've got Yerv next. That's a big game. They're away from home. If they lose that, then I think it could be panic stations. Is this the year they finally kind of play below their level, what they've been doing, and get sucked into a relegation battle? They've started poorly before sometimes though and come back, so I'm not going to completely slag them off or anything yet, but something's not right with Kristiansund, Jonathan. I think the biggest problem is in defence. They're not looking solid. They're conceding too many chances. And unless they tighten things up, they definitely could be in some trouble.
I mean, is there any... I know that we've got a question coming up about Haugesund as well, so we will talk about that in the preseason podcast, which obviously, as I mentioned, please do go back and listen to them if you haven't done so. On YouTube, of course, we've time-stamped every single team, so if you just want to go straight to a team, don't forget you can just go on YouTube on the preseason shows and click on the team you want to listen to, and obviously you can listen to their sort of 5-10 minute preview as well for both podcasts. But you predicted Kristiansund in 9th this season. You've said you're concerned about them. Is there anything you didn't spot maybe that gives you a cause of concern? Is it kind of maybe managerial tactics? Is it just players underperforming? I know it's very early days, but what do you sort of put it down to at the moment, just based on what you've seen so far, that makes you start to think that they could even struggle this year?
They've got a defender called Dan Peter Ulvestad who has missed the first 2 games, and he's not always been a guaranteed starter in the last couple of seasons. Kind of rotates in and out of the team. But I just wonder if his influence in the whole squad not being there has made a difference. But I've never really noticed him as being particularly crucial for them before. I don't know what it is. I mean, to be fair, first game, Allsvenskan, I think, had a really good game against them. You've got to give credit to Allsvenskan. But it was worrying. I think the XG against Allsvenskan was nearly over 2 for Allsvenskan. And then Sarpsborg obviously hit them 3-0 in the first half the weekend. I don't know. They were really solid defensively last year. Maybe it did rely on McDermott quite a bit in goal. So maybe, his heroics are not coming off yet. It might just be that the writing was on the wall maybe after last year. They need to somehow, they desperately need a clean sheet against Yeovil to win. They need to sort of win ugly, Jonathan, really. I think just to settle them down, and then they can, build on that. They will still be, I think they'll be dangerous against some of the top sides, though, when they don't have much possession, hit them on the break, and probably might be in their element there a bit more. But let's just see. Let's see how the next 2 games go for them and take it from there.
Yeah, we have to stress it. It's very early days. There's only 2 games played for the Owls. That's their nickname, Kristiansund the Owls. So they got a nice owl in their badge. I'm a fan of them. I definitely don't want to see them going down. I've taken a bit of a soft spot to them for the way they've given teams a bit of a bruising in the past few years, bigger teams. But obviously not a good start for their season. Their next game, as you mentioned, is away to Jerv. So maybe that's a winnable game potentially for them. Let's move on. Before we wrap up part 1, we're about to wrap it up now, but just one final comment. Steve, you just wanted to mention something about fantasy, didn't you? Yeah,
and you asked me there about the 3 promoted teams' assets, and I just wanted to talk about Lillestrøm assets, because I think that change in fixture now, Lillestrøm Allsvenskan moving to match day 4, I think there's some players that you can definitely consider getting from that team, because Akor Adams, the Nigerian, has really impressed me first 2 games. He came off the bench and turned things around for them against Hamkamp, scored. He started against Jerv and scored a header. He looks quality. I think he looks a fantastic addition from the Obosligaen side, Sogndal. He's got something about him. And I think he's only 8 million. But I really like this Adams. And Yermun Assen showed signs against Jerv that he's just starting to get into positions where he should be scoring goals. He's always potentially an assist machine. So I think you could definitely look at those 2 now of the next 2 or 3 game days and get some good points out of them. A lot might be going towards Paul-Andre Halland, who looks in fine form. But honestly, he could go down at any minute with an injury. I don't trust him for fitness. And will he necessarily get a lot of minutes? But he's certainly a quality player at the moment. And just wanted to point out, I think Lillestrøm are a good team to move towards in terms of a fantasy direction at the moment. It's fairly obvious, and a lot will be talking about it, but just felt like it had to be mentioned.
Love that. Thanks so much. Good recap of the first few weeks. We will answer some listener questions in the next part of the show, but for now, pretty much wraps up Norway. Keep an eye out, Roma, Bodø Glimt. That's going to be a huge game on Thursday. We shall be sort of commenting on that. Maybe we'll give a few thoughts. Steve, very cutting comments on Jose Mourinho there. Let us know what you think on Twitter at Nordic Football, of course. I've not said anything about Mourinho, so I'm keeping quiet. But it has got. Let's put it this way: it's got ugly at the end of the days, and that's going to be a huge game. It's a bit of turning into a grudge match, which is probably just how Mourinho likes it, isn't it? Coming up in part 2, we're going to talk about Allsvenskan. We're going to answer your listener questions in both leagues and look a little bit ahead to the weekend's games as well, just briefly. So stay tuned, and we'll be back in part 2. Don't forget, of course, as well, if you want more Norwegian football content, every single team has been previewed in the preseason podcast. So we've talked about every single team in that. Do go back. It's only a week old. And there's plenty that we talked about, isn't there? Hours and hours of worth of content in those episodes. So do go back if you haven't and let us know what you think. We'll be back in part 2.
Welcome back to the Nordic Football Podcast. I'm Steve Wyss and I'm with Jonathan Fadugba. Coming up at the end of this episode, all your questions answered this week. There were loads of them sent in. Thank you very much for those. So we look forward to that at the end. But now we're going to be talking about our Svenskan matters. And Jonathan, just looking at the table now, actually, 4 teams with a 100% record. Marti Cifuentes' Hammarby lead the way on goal difference after a thumping 5-1 win over Sundsvall in round 2. So, thoughts so far about this Allsvenskan season, and how impressed are you with Hammarby at the moment?
Yeah, very impressed, I have to say. Opening game, they were okay. Got a solid win, but second game, just most recently at Sundsvall, they were very impressive. They actually tore them apart, to be honest. Some will argue that maybe the scoreline didn't reflect the flow of the game in terms of maybe it was a little bit harsh on GIF Sundsvall in a way. But to be honest, I thought that the way they pressed the ball high up the field, you could see a real unity in Hammarby. That impressed me, I have to say. Absolutely took apart GIF Sundsvall away from home, of course. First game of the season, they got a narrow 2-1 win over Helsingborg. Williot Swedberg and Gustav Ludvigsson with the goals. Williot Swedberg with a nice sort of tap in. He's one of our Allsvenskan tend to watch on the Patreon. And Al Hamlawi got one back for Helsingborg, but it was like sort of a narrow win. Did look quite good, Hammarby at times, but still showed signs of maybe conceding goals and things like that. But in this game at the weekend, I have to say they really turned on the style in a big way. Nahir Basara got 2 goals. Edvin Kurtulus and Swedberg again was on the score sheet. So yeah, and a very, very impressive win. Saku Latupa got one back for GIF Sundsvall. But yeah, like I say, Steve, sometimes with teams you get a sort of sense that they're building something. And I thought the way that they were in transitions, I thought the way they were in and out of possession, you could sort of see good coaching. And I already seen from some of the cup games, the Swedish cup games earlier before, in pre-season, that they looked like they had signs of a well-coached team. And nothing changed my mind in this match. They were very, very impressive.
Yes, I have to say, Marti Cifuentes has always certainly down the years impressed me as a manager and a coach. And it doesn't surprise me to see him go well at Hammarby here. So they've started well. Häcken have certainly started very well too, haven't they? And I remember last season you said, they're going to be second place. They could be the dark horse for the title. Maybe you were 1 year too soon on them, Jonathan, because they're certainly out of the blocks quickly here.
Yeah, I don't think they'll be, anywhere near the title. I think did I predict them second last year? It kind of seems like a weird dream. They were so bad at the start of the season, it almost feels weird. But a lot of people tipped them to win a title. Go.
Yeah, you weren't the only one, in fairness.
No, it wasn't like a random prediction. I was actually, some people even had them for the title to win it. So it was the way they collapsed was quite alarming, really. But the good start for them. I'm not getting carried away because, as I said, they kind of they had a lot of hype at the beginning of last season and sort of fell away. So I'm not gonna hype them now. The start of the season, obviously, with a massive win against AIK. That was a big upset, actually. I was surprised by that. 4-2, Alexander Yeremiev hat-trick, and Oscar Udenas, and then obviously Nabil Bahoui and Ayari got goals back for AIK, but they really performed well in that game. Beko Häcken, really offensive, looked very dangerous on the ball, and really stunned AIK, who usually don't concede many goals. So to concede 4, it was quite shocking. I think in the year that they won the title, they only conceded 16 goals, I think, in 30 games. So that's 25% of that in one match. It was many years ago now, but it just gives you a bit of an insight into how good their defense has been historically in the past sort of 5 years or so. But IFK Häcken then followed out with a 2-1 win at Degerfors. Now this might not sound like quite a big win, but I thought it was very impressive because Jeremieff was missing the game with an illness, and they had a couple of other injuries, people missing from the match. So I was, when the news came out Jeremieff wasn't playing, you thought to yourself, well, maybe that's a big loss for them. But it showed that they maybe have a decent squad as well. Ibrahim Sadiq got 2 goals, looks a decent talent, he does, and again they had that sort of attacking style, looked quite prominent. Looked like they could even maybe have scored a couple more on the break and things like that. So Degerfors aren't necessarily the best team defensively in general, but you've still got to beat what's in front of you. So yeah, very impressive start to this season from IFK Häcken, I have to say.
Yeah, Degerfors have actually run into 2 good teams, haven't they, in their first couple of games, and it might actually surprise a few teams when they start to get a more softer fixture schedule. I'm actually going to run through the results from round 2. Fairly low.
Might want to start with round 1.
Start with round 1 even. Yes, we've forgot about that. We'll start with round 1. Djurgården beat Degerfors 3-1. Mjällby went to Elfsborg and won 2-0. IFK Göteborg 2, Värnamo 1. Kalmar 0, Malmö 1. Norrköping 0, Varberg 1. Sirius 2, Sundsvall 1. Häcken 4, IFK 2. And Hammarby beat Helsingborg 2-1. The second round was actually fairly low scoring apart from that Hammarby game. Hammarby won 5-1 in Sundsvall. 2-1 win for Häcken against Degerfors. Kalmar with a 3-0 success against Varberg. And then Mjällby 1, Djurgården 0. A bit of a shock, that, really. Helsingborg 0, IFK Göteborg 1. There was a bit of fisticuffs in that, wasn't there, Jonathan? I saw you tweet that. And IFK 1, Norrköping 0, Värnamo 0, Sirius 0 on Monday evening. And Malmö are held, the defending champions, to a 1-1 draw against Elfsborg. So, yeah, quite a few tight games in round 2, Jonathan, really, in this game. Mjällby with one of them, a 1-0 win against Djurgården there. And they backed, 2 wins against Elfsborg and Djurgården. That's dead impressive, isn't it?
Yeah, they've started the season very strongly. Obviously, good friend of the podcast, Anders Torstensson, stepped down in the last season, and they've got a new coach in, and it doesn't really look like they, they're willing to slow down. To be honest, massive wins really. I caught some of the game against Djurgården. Djurgården did actually dominate the ball and kind of just couldn't, that deep block of Mjällby, they just couldn't break it down. They struggled in attacking areas and just couldn't really. Mjällby were putting their bodies on the line, clearing, blocking, really like dedicated to defending their box. And Andreas Brandstrom will be very happy with how things went, to be honest, in that game. They also look quite like the decent going forward, to be fair to them. Mamadou Moro scored in both games. He's looked very, very lively, the 27-year-old. In the box, he took his goal brilliantly against Djurgården for the winner. Kind of unexpected, but the way he took it was very nice. They've also got a few players who are looking good in midfield as well. So it's not like they're just it's not like Burnley would be maybe an interesting comparison, but it's not like they're just talentless. They're very, very good defensively, like so well drilled, so strong defensively. They've got a lot of good young. They've got a lot of good players in defense. Strong players. Carlos Morris Gracia. He was part of that team that nearly broke the Allsvenskan clean sheet record last season. He's almost too good for Allsvenskan in a way, or too good to be a team like Mjällby, you could argue. They've got a lot of solid defenders who throw their body on the line, but they're not, like I say, a team of cloggers who just can't do anything with the ball. When they're on it, they look quite decent. I have to say players like Otto Rosengren, I quite like him, the youngster, and a few others in that midfield. So, yeah, they're not. They're not a team. They're not a sort of team that can't play football. I don't think that, to be honest. I think if you give them the possession, they can build something. Against Elfsborg, that 2-0 win on the opening day. On the opening weekend. I actually thought for spells of it they looked really, really dangerous. Loftus and Moro got the goals, but the second goal, for example, was a brilliant goal. Counter attacking and really nice. So it's not like they're a team that just can't play the ball around. They matched Elfsborg at times. Pound for pound in terms of possession. what they did with it. So, no, Mjällby are a team to watch, to be fair. They've really impressed me.
Yeah, and I'm just going to quickly talk about a bit of Allsvenskan fantasy here. And I just want to congratulate Mikael Tillberg, who's currently top of the NFP Fantasy League on 143 points. Just 6 points between me and you at the moment, Jonathan, by the way. And not you had a good round there with Basara. But in terms of fantasy assets for Mjällby, I can already see that over 20% have took Morrow into their side. Embarrassingly, for a team that I love, I don't actually have a Mjällby player in my fantasy squad. So should I be adding one?
Yes, I think you should. Let's not forget, Steve, Elfsborg away, Djurgården at home is probably about as difficult a start to the season as you can get. You couldn't get a tougher start, really. For them to get 6 points from that is absolutely incredible, I have to say. On the expected goals for the game against Djurgården was only 0.32, but the way Morrow took his goal was sensational. And as I say, against Elfsborg had 60% possession, but what Mjällby did with the ball was decent. 75% completion rate on the ball, 245 accurate passes. So I'm not saying they have a huge amount of possession or whatever, but when they have it, they're not terrible with it. Against Diff, it went down a bit there with that percentage because they kind of were happy to just lump the ball up and get rid of it, kind of thing. Because Djurgården did pressure them, the likes of Haksabanovic. They were looking lively, but Djurgården have got a lot of strong attacking players, so to keep a clean sheet is really, really impressive. If you look at their next game, I think this next game will be the big test for them. This Friday they got Hammarby away, so big top of the table clash, that one between the two of them, and I think that will be the biggest test they can face at the moment. And I think we'll learn a lot about Hammarby as well. If they sort of batter Mjällby, then you really might sit up and be like, hang on a minute, this team's here to stay. If they can't get anything past Mjällby, then maybe, we reassess, what are they going to do this season? Because Hammarby are always a team where, maybe top 6, top 7, but not have, they're kind of flattered to deceive in recent seasons. And let's not forget Mjällby finished 9th last year, so they're kind of mid-table as well themselves. So they beat Hammarby at home last season, and away from home, Hammarby won 2-0. It was an early game as well, but Akin Kumyamu scored in that one. He's obviously left, so we'll learn a lot about Mjällby, I think, this weekend. In terms of fantasy, well, there's a lot of assets you could have in your team. Obviously, Morrow and Krisak are the two ones that a lot of people have. Ivan Krisak, 4.5 million. Noah Isla started really well as well, 4.6. So, if you had Mjällby defenders in your team this first 2 game weeks, you're absolutely laughing all the way to the points bank. But, I've got Mamadou Morrow in my team. So, at 5 million, I think that's fantastic value. Price is already going up. So, but then again, there's a lot of top-heavy. This league is quite top-heavy in strikers, isn't it? There's the likes of Selmani, Edvardsen, Marcus Berg, Keith Tellin, Jordan Larson look good at the weekend. So many strikers to pick in your team. So there's a lot of options. But yeah, I think Mjällby, all I'll say is that they look good at the moment. So, I wouldn't be against having them in your team. Let's put it that way.
I really am going to have to look here at some Mjällby players. They got a tough one against Hammarby, so I'm not sure I will have the balls to add anyone for this round. They've got 3 nice soft fixtures after that before they go to Malmö away. But they won there last year, didn't they? So the sort of game they like. But yes, Mjällby so far, very, very impressive indeed. Another team with a 100% record. And I can't believe I'm actually saying this is IFK Göteborg, probably the best start they've ever made since we've been doing these podcasts, I think. 2 wins out of 2 for them. All right, they maybe haven't beaten much so far. I'm not even sure they've actually looked that impressive. I was looking at the XG stats for their games, and they've both been pretty similar in terms of very equal games anyway against promoted sides. But hey, 6 points on the board. IFK fans are not going to be moaning, are they? Are you impressed, or are they? There's going to be some bigger challenges to come shortly.
No, I've not been massively impressed. Highest XG in the league at the moment after 2 games is Häcken, 6.8. That's incredible XG. And you compare them against their Gothenburg rivals, Göteborg are kind of near the bottom, 1.86 XG. So, even though they've scored 3 goals, they're not really creating a huge amount, but they do have one big weapon in their team, and that is Marcus Berg. Pound for pound, is he the best striker in the league? Even, you could argue. Or is he the best player in the league? You could argue. I mean, he's had a fantastic career, and maybe there's an argument to be made that he is the best player, one of the best players in the league. He's a difference maker, and that's what he's done in his first 2 games this season. He got the winner, of course, in their game against Helsingborg, obviously, and in the first match, of course, he set up the winner. So he's looked all right so far. Got an assist and scored one as well. Sorry, so he's firing, and obviously they beat Varnamo 2-1 in the opener. But Varnamo at home, it's a fairly comfortable game. You should be winning that sort of game, I think, if you're IFK Göteborg. And then they followed that with a sort of a decent win against Helsingborg, who struggled. You mentioned the fights. There was fights on the pitch and off the pitch. I don't know if you saw the actual follow-up tweet I put out, but there was massive rucks outside the stadium before the game. Helsingborg have got a bit of an element among their fan base. They're a bit naughty. I think they quite enjoy playing in England, like the Championship or something, because they'd like to have a ruck with Millwall or whoever else. They seem to. If you go and look at that video that we posted it on Twitter, just go through the timeline at Nordic Football. There's like people running around the streets. You'd think it's like an army or something. People running around beating each other up. Like it's kind of crazy scenes. And it went onto the pitch. Hossam Aish got into a bit of a scrap with Armin Djidjevic, who's back at Helsingborg, of course. It was a bit of a scrappy game. Really good atmosphere, to be fair. Helsingborg have got good fans. They are an Allsvenskan club, really. They've got a good fan base, and it was a lively atmosphere. Well supported. But IFK managed to get the win. But let's face it, they've played 2 promoted sides. We don't know enough about IFK yet. We will learn a lot about them this weekend because we have the Gothenburg derby on Sunday. IFK Häcken, Göteborg, one of the big games in the calendar. If I was there, I'll be definitely watching this one. This is a tasty game. I've never been to a derby actually, but this will be a great game to watch. So we'll learn a lot, I think, about where both teams are in this match.
Yeah, I think we will, won't we? And Helsingborg, they often seem to be involved in these sort of kerfuffles, don't they? Certainly a fan base that like to express themselves. Let's just say that. Hey, Jonathan. Now, I saw a tweet of yours this week about a retiring member of the IFK Gothenburg staff. And I know you've got a few things to say about this, Jonathan. So fire away.
Yeah, I mean, the big news in Gothenburg, there's a lot of restructuring going on behind the scenes at IFK, and it came out this past week or so. It's been revealed that IFK Göteborg chief scout Olle Sultan will be retiring in the summer, and they're now looking at a replacement. It's looking like Norrköping's chief scout Stig Torbjörnsson is the favourite and might even get the job. Torbjörnsson, to be fair to him, he's got a bit of a track record now and a big reputation. Scouting the likes of Adik Benro, for example, who they signed for, I think, £100,000 and sold for about $3 million in the year. And he was Allsvenskan top scorer. And just in general, Haksabanovic, they've made a lot of money, Norrköping, off their scouting in the past 2-3 years. That's put him as the main man, maybe to get the IFK job. So it'd be a big, maybe a big appointment for IFK. But I have to talk about Olle Sultan, Steve, because he is an absolute club legend of that football club. And now I want to tell a bit of a story because obviously people who follow the podcast and maybe know me, obviously now I spent time in Gothenburg and I moved out there. And I'll never forget when I went out there. Obviously, I went out and I was like looking for teams. I was living in Gothenburg and I was like, right, I want to know all the local teams. I want to get to know people, in the football world, because obviously that's my passion. Started emailing clubs, and saying, can I have a meeting? Is there a way I can help you? Can we work together? Could I help you scout? Whatever. Only person to reply to me at that time was Olle Sultan of IFK Göteborg. He got back to me and he invited me for a cup of. He invited me to come and meet him at the club's premises. And I'll never forget this. I sort of dressed up. I was like, wow, I'm going to go to IFK Göteborg and meet their chief scout. And there's 2 parts to this funny story. The first part is I got lost in the woods on the way there. Now I took a bus, right? And I was wearing these really comfortable. I posted it on Instagram. I might even get the video out at some point. I was wearing these really smart shoes, right, Steve? And I got to the train station in Göteborg, the tram system. And I realized, I was like, wait a minute, I've got like about a mile walk from here. And, I didn't want to spend money on the taxi or whatever because it was quite expensive, to be fair. But in hindsight, I probably should have, because I've got this big meeting. I'm in a suit, right? I'm in like a suit jacket and really smart shoes. I ended up having to walk because IFK Göteborg, Kamrat Garden, is like in the middle of nowhere. It's basically like in some field, around the back of some fields, basically. It's in the sort of middle of nowhere in Gothenburg. I ended up having to walk. I went the completely wrong way, but I ended up having to walk through the woods. And we're talking like Gothenburg, I think it was like October, November, rainy, snowy. I was walking through like the middle of the forests. Like my shoes are absolutely soaked, drenched, like covered in mud. You know what I mean? I looked an absolute disgrace, to be honest. And I had to stop and ask a farmer, like, where am I? Right. This is how ridiculous it was.
Sounds like you're in Yorkshire.
Yeah. I had to stop, and there was this local farmer with a bunch of horses, and I was like, sorry, do you know where IFK Göteborg is? Where their home premises are? Anyway, I managed to eventually point him in the right direction. I was thinking this guy could like kill me or something. I'm in the middle of a forest, like open forest, like no one around for miles. I was like, I was like getting a bit worried, like where the hell am I? He pointed me in the right direction anyway, and I ended up going there, had a meeting with Olle Sultan, and he's just the nicest guy, honestly. Such a wonderful person, such a warm soul, such a nice person. He welcomed me into the club. We had a good chat. We were talking about like the old days. He's a Liverpool fan. He was talking about sort of the Liverpool years, and I was telling him about when Manchester United played IFK Göteborg in the 90s. They have like they have one of the flags or whatever, what they call the things they exchange at the kickoff.
Yeah.
One of them in the club office. He introduced me to the manager at the time. It was Jörgen Lennartson. And then I'll never forget, just want to tell a little bit of a story. When I first got there, he was like, can I offer you anything? And me being a sort of Englishman, I was like, yeah, can I have a cup of tea, please? And I'll never forget, Olle Sultan just burst out laughing. He's like laughing. I mean, we never met before. He just burst out laughing. He's like, you English man. And he just started laughing at me, like, because it was such a, I guess like everyone in Gothenburg drinks coffee or whatever, but he couldn't get over it. He kept laughing the whole meeting, like just laughing at it. And we went to the kitchen and he was like, there was no tea basically. So in the end, I think I had a green tea or whatever. They had like a green tea, but he was like, what kind of coffee? I was like, English breakfast. And he just kept laughing and laughing, like, you typical Englishman, you know what I mean? And ever since that day, like, we've kept in touch. He's a really like lovely guy. He came to England and we went to a game at one point a couple of years ago before the pandemic. And I just wanted to say that because, he's a retiring legend. He's been at the club, I think, more than 20 years, and done a lot of good scouting for that club. He found a lot of good players. I remember, for example, them finding Kirishvili. He was the one behind scouting them, and many, many players over the years he's found at that club. And I just wanted to give him a shout out because he's a wonderful person, and he'll be sorely missed at IFK Göteborg. So happy retirement, Mr. Sultan. It's always been a pleasure knowing you, and take care of yourself, and I wish you a comfortable retirement.
We certainly do wish him well for retirement there, and I've got visions of you going through these forests and getting attacked by a bear or something, and whatever's out there, a wolverine.
Yeah, I mean, just to recap, Olle Sultan's been at the club since 1990. So he's a legend of the club. Like that's a long time. That's 30 plus years. He's found the likes of Lasse Viber, Haitam Ali Sami. He's done huge amounts of scouting in the past. He really knows his football. And it was worth getting lost in the field. But you've got to bear in mind, Steve, when I turned up, my shoes were like covered in mud. I looked like a complete mess. Like I had to ask someone for like a tissue to wipe my shoes before the meeting. But it was like, I'll never forget that first meeting with him because it was just such a funny meeting. But yeah, it's I hope he has a great retirement. And obviously he's still there now, and they've got a big derby this weekend.
All right. Well, we're gonna move to some questions soon, but game of the round in terms of the big fixture probably was Malmö against Elfsborg Monday evening. It's ended in a 1-1 draw, Jonathan. Did that result surprise you a little bit?
Not really. I haven't actually caught this game, to be honest. I saw bits of it, but Elfsborg are a good team, and that's why it was so surprising that Mjällby went there to their place and beat them 2-0. That really shocked me, that one. Malmö aren't quite at the races at the moment, and I think their manager has come out and sort of criticised the first two performances, even the first game at Kalmar. Kalmar dominated that game possession-wise, as they do. But Malmö did enough to get the win. They were actually booed off the pitch after this game. So
really,
that tells you a little bit about Malmö's start to this season. They were booed, and so the managers come out and said, obviously Berman Savic scored a goal, and then the Elfsborg got back into the match. But yeah, I mean, it's the first time they've dropped points this season, but still, there's big expectations this year, and I think that the fans weren't happy with it, to be honest. Elfsborg defended quite well, even though they did concede a goal, but they looked okay. But yeah, there was those boos, and there's not happiness at the moment amongst them. And one other interesting point on this, Steve. Guess who was at the game? Well, you won't guess, but
go on, man. Who's that?
Les Ferdinand.
Really?
Yeah. Now he's the club technical director at QPR. He was at this game scouting, and he's been interviewed during the game. Obviously, the cameras caught him, and the media asked him, "Why are you here? Who are you here to watch?" Obviously, keeping his cards close to his chest, he didn't say anything. He just said, "I'm here to have a look." He mentioned that he's watching one player from Malmö, one player from Elfsborg. So who knows? Could it be
Johan Larsson?
Could it be your friend Larsson? Even maybe. Who knows? But people are speculating. Of course, Berman Savic might be one. Trying to think who else. Maybe if he went for a young player, maybe he might have spotted Hugo Larsson, who came off the bench, the young 17-year-old who's got a bright future. I've talked about him, in the preseason podcast a little bit. So who knows who we're watching? Elfsborg have a lot of good young players as well, by the way. So probably a decent game to go to, which I'm kind of jealous of him. Milojevic after the game said, "I feel that after we went 1-0 up, we lost some intensity, and we were satisfied with what we have instead of going to kill the match. It was a bit in between. We were no better than that, and we deserved a point. So it was a fair result." And he said he's disappointed. And he said we haven't started our season at our level. This is something that we need to change. So it's not all sky and blue skies and roses for Malmö at this moment in time.
No, but I mean, 1-1 drop's not too bad for them, and a good point for Elfsborg as well. So, let's move on to the questions then. We've had a lot of questions this week from the listeners, and or on Twitter anyway. Not necessarily listeners; they might just want to ask us something. We're going to start with one that's just come in literally as we're live here recording this from Team Overs. And Team Overs, thank you very much for your support of the podcast down the years. We really appreciate it. But his question to both of us, it seems. So you're going to get first dibs here, Jonathan. What team would you like to see play in Sweden or Norway live? I guess bucket list of teams you would like to see. Now, you're fortunate enough to have been out there and watched a lot of football. But what is sort of left on that bucket list in Sweden for you, Jonathan? Or Norway, even?
Great question, Team Overs, and thanks, of course, for your loyal support. He's backed us a lot, both on Patreon and on the main pod. So, want to give a huge shout out to Team Overs, and obviously, thank you for interacting as you always do. Always great to see you pop up in the comments. Bucket list in Sweden definitely is get to a Stockholm derby. Never been to one. In terms of atmosphere, probably best game I've been to was IFK Malmö. That was a huge game in terms of fans, really exciting. But I'd love to go to a Stockholm derby, go and watch, for example, AIK Djurgården or Hammarby. That would be fantastic. I've never actually been to a game in Stockholm, to be honest. So I've not seen any of those top teams live. I'd love to go to a Gothenburg derby as well, of course. So I think if you're someone who's new to Swedish football, maybe, and you don't know which teams you should go and watch and that kind of thing. Of course, AIK are a huge club. I think they had 27,000 in their first game against Norrköping at the weekend. Big fans, and they always have like tifos and things like that. It's always quite impressive to watch. I think if you actually, Elfsborg has been a bit disappointing. Their attendance has been quite far down at the start of the season. They got a little bit of criticism as well for it. Don't know why that is. Norrköping as well had lower attendance than normal in their opening day. If you're in a big city like Stockholm, then of course, Hammarby, AIK and Djurgården are very well supported. So if you go to a home game, you're always going to enjoy that. If you fancy something maybe a bit different, maybe get yourself up to the north, go and watch GIF Sundsvall or something like that. It'll be very cold. You can enjoy that. It's a completely different vibe. But yeah, obviously Malmö, of course, as well. How can you forget Malmö? IFK is a fantastic ground when you go to it. When it's pumping, the fans are really good. IFK Häcken's a very tight ground, a bit different. I've said it before in this pod. Only game I've ever been to where they have a couch inside the stadium, within the bowels of the stadium. and you can sit down and play FIFA, and they give you free popcorn and stuff like that. So, the only game I've ever been to where I've sat there just playing FIFA and having free popcorn. Unbelievable scenes. You could have sat there all day and just missed the game. But so they're a very different vibe, family club, Häcken. Very, very nice club, actually. But yeah, those are the sort of big teams, I would say. And Helsingborg, actually, a well-supported club as well. If you ever wanted to get to a Helsingborg-Malmö derby, I'm pretty sure, as long as you've got your protective armor, because the way Helsingborg fans are acting in that weekend, I'm sure there'll be a few fights in that one because they don't like each other, Helsingborg and Malmö. So hopefully that gives a bit of an answer.
Yeah, my answer would be I would like to go to the north of Norway, Tromsø, Bodø, Glimt, Rosenborg as well. To be fair, places like Molde and Ålesund. Probably the only sort of match in the south that I would really be interested in, I think, would be the Oslo derby, Vålerenga Lillestrøm. But I've always wanted to go well up north. I was actually jealous. There's a guy in my pub pool team who went on a cruise to see the Northern Lights, and he actually docked in Tromsø.
Wow! And
I didn't actually say it to him, but I was bloody jealous, to be honest with you, that he's been there. So yeah, definitely up north is what I would love to see, like Bodø, Glimt, Tromsø. I do have a thing for northern teams. Like if Sweden, I would definitely go to GIF or anywhere that's further north that's in the lower leagues.
That's the northerner in you, isn't it? Just generally.
Yeah, I think so. I really think so, Jonathan. Yeah, for sure. Apart from that, Mjällby. But yes, next question for you. And this was actually part of our itinerary, but I skipped it on the itinerary because I knew I was going to ask this question. It's from Cole at Roller Father. Thank you very much for your question. I don't think we've ever had one from you before, but thanks again. It's obviously early, but should Norrköping be concerned by these early results? 2 losses and no goals in league play, despite massively outpossessing and outchancing the opposition. Norrköping, talk to me about them.
Thank you to Cole. He's based in Michigan, according to his Twitter bio. So, yeah, that's great to have a listener from the States. Yes, I would be concerned about Norrköping. If you follow us on Patreon and back us on Patreon, my one tip for this weekend was AIK to beat Norrköping. And it came in. By the way, I'm 4 out of 4 now, 100% success rate so far this season. So stay tuned this week. It means, maybe I can keep it going, but obviously the pressure's on now. But I'm very happy with that 100% prediction rate so far. I've got every prediction right. And of course, you've only got one wrong as well. So, we're on 88%, as I mentioned. But I'm worried about Norrköping. That was the reason I backed AIK. I thought that they were very poor in the first game against Varberg. Yes, they had chances, but Varberg really, came away with a clean sheet, and the mistake for the goal was a horrendous mistake from Theodor Rask. So all is not really well at Norrköping. There's a little bit of maybe question marks around Rickard Norling at this moment in time. Fans a little bit disgruntled. They've lost a lot of players in the window. Salim Edegbenro, top league goal scorer, he's gone. They've also lost other players like Haksabanovic over the last sort of 6 months. Generally speaking, like I said in the pre-season show, their transfer business, they've done really amazing scouting. Like I mentioned, they've made a lot of money, but with that comes a cost. They've lost Alexander Franson, of course. He's a title winner with the club. He's gone to Greece. Isak Bergman Johannesson, we talked about him so much a couple of seasons ago, and he was in my 10 to watch last year. He's now gone to FC Copenhagen. He's gone. Huge talent he is, 19-year-old. So sometimes you lose the balance between, you spend too much money on players. And I think that's kind of where they are. They've almost done too well. If we look at some of the players they've lost, Pontus Almqvist as well, a while back. Eric Smith's gone. Bergman Johannesson, as I mentioned, Haksabanovic, Franson, Alec Benro, Carl Bjork, Kalle Holmberg. There's a lot of players leaving, and it's hard for them to replace all of them. So I think that there is, I think the transfer business it was okay, but I didn't come out of it thinking it was amazing, to be honest. Obviously, Henrik Castigan was left as well at the back, so they have lost a lot of players, and I think they're in that period of time where they're trying to rebuild. So yeah, I'm a bit worried about them. The other thing I have to say, and it's quite sad news, of course, that came out this week. Christopher Kazani, we wish him all the best because it was announced that he'll be stepping down from football indefinitely with what is reported as quite a serious illness. And it hasn't been announced what the problem is exactly yet, but when it was announced, Rickard Norling came out and was very despondent, said it's very, very serious. The players as well kind of came out after the game against the AIK and said that they haven't even been able to train this week because they've been so disappointed. So yeah, I don't know exactly what's happened, if I'll be honest. I think they're keeping it close to their chest in terms of what he's been diagnosed with or what his problem is, but it's clearly affected all the players and all the squad. Rickard Norling said after the game, it's been a terrible week. All the players warmed up with shirts with his name and number on it. He said, it's so bad, it's not true. It's impressive that the players managed to focus and get a performance that is really good considering what happened. Football comes second. So he said, sometimes you have to handle the combination of the fact that it is about life and death, and it's connected to the fact that you have to play football 2 or 3 days later as if nothing happened. It takes a lot out of you. Jonathan Levi came out and said, it's awful. When I think about it, my stomach goes in knots. It really hurts. Yesterday was the first real training session we had this week after everything that happened. There's more to life than football. And, from the sounds of it, it really sounds grim. I really hope it's not something too serious, but from the comments there, you can get in a picture of maybe how bad it is. So obviously their minds are elsewhere at the moment, so you have to give them a little bit of leeway. But you also have to admit they haven't really been great at the start of this season. They play Djurgården this weekend, and I think that'll be a tough game for them as well. So all our thoughts and prayers are with Christopher Gazani at this moment in time, but not a good start for Norrköping on or off the pitch.
We wish Christopher all the best. Very, very sad news indeed. Let's try and bring a bit more positivity now, Jonathan. A couple of questions I'm going to tie in together, actually. The first one from Varson. Thank you very much for your question. As always, another great supporter of the podcast down the years. He asked, which player that has not been mentioned so far in the pod have you been most impressed with in the 2 games so far? 2 rounds, I'm guessing. And then also Alex, at Alex80318823. Which player do you think has been the most promising so far in the Allsvenskan?
2 most impressive players. Thank you to Wasson. I loved your comment, by the way, on YouTube. I am going to get back to you on that. But I've just been so busy after the preseason podcast that I needed a break. But I will get back to you on that. We've had so much content in this past sort of 10 days. I think we've done at least 10 hours nearly of content. 2 best players I've seen so far that haven't mentioned in my 10 to watch anyway. I think I mentioned them briefly on the preseason show, but I didn't go into much detail. Oscar Udenas, I think, at Häcken has been magnificent at the start of this season. He's really stepped up. New signing for them, come from Varnamo, I think it is, and I have to say he's looked very, very good. Done better than I expected. Maybe he's a 19-year-old left winger. Last season, 22 games, 6 goals for Varnamo when they won obviously the promotion to the Superettan, and joined Beko Häcken on a free. He's done really well at the start of this campaign. So, well done to him. Looks lively. In the opening game, I think he scored in his debut, didn't he, against Häcken? So, and got an assist as well, goal and assist in his debut. And he followed it up in the next game, looked fairly lively. You could also mention Ibrahim Sadiq as well at Häcken, who, replaced Jeremy and got 2 goals. So that was a fantastic start to him. He's from Right to Dream Academy, a young Ghanaian. But the other lad I want to mention that has really impressed me is Mjällby, actually, a centre midfielder called Otto Rosengren. I've really liked what I've seen of him so far. I thought in the Elfsborg game he was excellent. He's an 18-year-old centre midfielder, and I really like the look of him in that match. I haven't, in the Djurgården games, a little bit different, so it's hard to really judge him. But those 2 are the players that have caught my eye at this early part of the season. Let's see how they get on, both young. And the other question, did you mention, was it from Alex, was it?
Yeah, Alex, yeah.
The most promising so far? Yeah, well, I'll stick with those 3. Ibrahim Sadiq, Oscar Udenas, and my man Otto Rosengren. Those 3 have looked really, really good at the start of this season. There's loads. And if you go on our 10 to watch, or Allsvenskan 10 to watch, obviously we on Patreon, we've done a huge analysis of them, a video of 10 players to keep an eye on, young talents. But those 3 aren't in that 10 to watch, and they're players that have kind of looked quite good at the start of this season.
Okay, next. So, Louis Dilmaida has actually asked us 3 questions. One of them's about Norway. He's got 2 about Sweden, and you've actually mostly answered pretty much what he has been on about. He specifically asked you about Sadiq there, which you've already talked about. But he did briefly go about Häcken. Just briefly, how do you analyse things there? Since it's a very offensive team that could be great for the league, and also about Mjällby in terms of their start. Do you credit the Mjällby start to a solid system already established, or something else?
Yeah, thanks, Luis. De Almeida always been a loyal follower. He always asks intelligent questions. He's got quite a few questions here, 3 questions as well. So fair play. I've already sort of touched on BK Häcken earlier in the show, so I won't talk too long about that. I think they look good, but I think we'll learn a lot about them this weekend in the big derby match. He mentioned obviously Ibrahim Sadiq, who I've talked about. He says could be a signing we'll talk about a lot this season. Potentially he could. He took his goals really well against Degerfors. Looks like a bit of a poacher. And I'll just read a comment actually on Sadiq that I didn't mention on the preseason show, but I talked about him a little bit, but I didn't say too much. Obviously, he comes from Nordsjælland. He got 6 goals, 4 assists in 63 games for them. He's a 21-year-old Ghanaian who can play right wing, left wing, or up front. And Martin Eriksson, the sporting director at BK Häcken, said he's a player with extreme speed and resilience, has good technique, and he's had a great education at Right to Dream and Nordsjælland. So he says that he thinks he can hit top quality. So, looks like he's got an all-round good background. Right to Dream, anyone who's studied Right to Dream Academy knows that they really put a lot of effort into Ghanaian players, not just on the pitch, but also off it. They help them get their education. They really give them a good grounding in terms of human values. It's like a holistic academy. They don't just focus on players and selling them. They actually invest into African talents and try and help them even get degrees and things like that. There's players who haven't made it, who've gone on to get PhDs and stuff like that. So they really invest in their education and well-being. And Sadiq's come through that academy. So one to watch, definitely. In terms of Mjällby, yeah, Anders Torstensen's laid the foundation there. As I mentioned, they nearly broke the Allsvenskan record for clean sheets, and he's just kept that. They've kept that going. I think they're a team that could impress a few this season. I don't think they're, I thought they'd be sort of lower mid-table this season, but who knows if they continue how they've started. They'll have a dip at some point. It's unnatural to do as well as they've started, but let's see how it goes from there. He also mentioned Silas and Wanko. I won't talk about that now, but I might talk about that on a future show. So, Louise, if you maybe ask that question again in future weeks, maybe we'll speak about that, maybe once he's played and things like that. Because I don't want to speculate too much about him at this moment in time without really seeing him. But yeah, I think the other one just thing I wanted to say, by the way, Steve, is Kalmar. We haven't really talked about Kalmar, but they've impressed me at the start of this season. And I just wanted to give a shout out to Ricardo Friedrich. What a save he made in the Varberg game. They won 3-0 at Varberg. Made a big penalty save, of course. And I know you like him from his time in Norway, but I hadn't quite mentioned him. So for some reason, Lewis's questions reminded me of goal. He mentions goalkeepers, doesn't he? Obviously, Mjällby lost their main goalkeeper. I think, as he said, they do have a solid system established, and I think Brandstrom will try and sort of develop it a little bit. I think Torstensen's still very close to the club. I think he's still got a lot of contact days, very popular. So I can see a continuation. And Mjällby is certainly a team to keep an eye on this year.
Last question for you then. It's from Paul, at Paul S1381. He's actually asking a couple of things. Are Hammarby an outside bet for the Allsvenskan? And how do you rate the chances of IFK keeping hold of Jordan Larsson?
Great questions, Paul. Thanks a lot for your support and for getting in contact. It's a good shout, actually, Hammarby for the title. Let's see how they get on against Mjällby, because I think we'll learn a little bit about both teams again there. Teams, obviously, there's a lot of teams that start well, and Hammarby, they tend to do okay at the beginning of seasons. They're not like, sometimes they do all right. The start of last season didn't go that well for them, but I remember them in past seasons where they've kind of like battered teams and look really lively, and you get sort of excited, and then it kind of all falls away. So I'm not going to sort of go overboard, but it's an exciting team. I think that if Martin Cifuentes can get the balance right in defence, then they really could be lively, and like that GIF Sundsvall game, they looked a bit like a kind of a Klopp team, I have to say, in the way that they pressed. They didn't let Kristiansund's defenders have any time on the ball at all. Really tried to close them down as much as they could, pressed a lot. Obviously in Sweden, we've got 5 substitutes, so they can kind of rotate a bit. They've got a decent squad. They can, obviously when you're pressing with that intensity, if you can make 5 subs, then it's a good advantage, isn't it? Klopp goes on about he wants to help the league and stuff like that. But I think any team that plays high press, being able to make 5 subs is a huge advantage, because you can bring on fresh players to continue that style of play. And I think it'll be a huge advantage for teams like Liverpool next year in the Premier League. But yeah, I think it's a bit early to say win the title, but I do think if you can get value, that they're an outside bet if Cifuentes continues the way he has started this season and molds that team, because they've got a huge amount of talent in that squad. You've got Salmani, Ludvigsson, Besara. You've got at the back, they've got solid players at the back. They've got a really good squad, actually. I'm just thinking of some of the other players that they've got. Dovan in goal, I really like him. Sandberg, Kurtulus is a great signing. Bjorn Paulsen, a decent player. Swedberg is doing really, really well. Bojanic, they've got a really strong squad, actually. And they haven't even brought in their new player, sort of Boubacar Chouali. He's still kind of not ready to play yet. When he's there, that's another big weapon. So maybe, yeah, keep an eye on it for sure. I don't know what the odds are, but certainly one to keep an eye on. The only thing I say with Hammarby is they're not like they don't have a huge history in terms of winning the league. They're not one of the most traditionally successful clubs in Sweden, believe it or not, even though they are one of the biggest. They've only won the league in their history. I think I'm not sure how many times, but it's not many. I'm just checking now, actually. Is it 1 or twice? Pretty sure it's once, yeah. They've only won the league once in their history in 2001. So they don't have that tradition of winning titles, and they are kind of, in Stockholm, they get ridiculed a bit for it, because they kind of, they tend to bottle it, and Djurgården and AIK kind of laugh at them as their smaller brother. But let's see how it goes. And just in terms of Jordan Larsson, he made a good debut, and I saw some comments from AIK fans saying that they think that he might fall in love with the club and kind of maybe decide to stay. Let's see how it goes, because I don't only think he's too good for Sweden. I think he's almost too good to be in Russia. Almost, I think he could actually go to a top 5 league and be good. Maybe even better than Netherlands. Maybe I could see him in somewhere like Portugal. I mean, I'm not saying Portugal's in the top 5 leagues, but or Scotland, somewhere like that. I could imagine maybe live his father's legacy and go back to Celtic, maybe, for example. There'll be a lot of clubs that would like him. So I think AIK might find it hard to keep him. He's almost completed Allsvenskan. When he was at Norrköping, he was brilliant. So I just wonder if maybe he might feel like, does he really want to stick around in Allsvenskan? He's only back temporarily because of obviously the situation in Russia. But I would imagine he'd want a bigger move. But you never know, obviously, how it goes. The situation in Russia, it's hard to predict. And, if no one comes in the summer for him, then he's got to prove himself, hasn't he, for the next few months. So let's see how it goes with him. But at this level, he's definitely top 3, top 4 strikers in the league.
Excellent stuff. And one more question from me. Are you satisfied with your start to Allsvenskan fantasy this season, Jonathan?
Yes, I'm happy. Had a good week this week. I know you're still ahead of me, so I'll never be satisfied while I'm below you in the table. You got advice and bailed you out as your captain, I saw. So I'm disappointed in Kiese Tellin as my captain this week, didn't score. So, but he's still a top player, isn't he? So I expect him to get goals. But while I'm below you, my friend, I'll never be 100% satisfied. Let's put it that way. But I don't think I've had too bad a start. So one thing's for sure this season, Johan Larsson is not going to get you over me because he's in my team. So you're going to have to think of a plan B on that one.
I think you mean business this season, and I can feel your threat, not just on me, but maybe an assault on the Nordic Football Pod League.
Yeah, I'm coming for fantasy this year. I want to, I want revenge after that. And even in Norway, I'm kind of like trying to take it a little bit more seriously now. That's why I'm so happy I'm not in the bottom 3, because normally, I think the past 2 seasons, Steve, in Norway, Eliteserien Fantasy, I've forgotten to do my team the first week. And I'm playing catch up all year long, I completely forget. And then, once you miss one round, you're basically screwed, aren't you? So, no, I'm happy that I made a decent start in Norway. I'll keep an eye on you there. And I'll also keep an eye on you on the Nordic League. So, I'm happy. Basara was really good for me this week, 17 points. And anyone who's got him, obviously, will be satisfied with that. So, let's move on to the Norway questions before we wrap up.
Yes. That's far away.
So the first question we have from David Weatherston. Thank you so much for your question, David. Always see you on Twitter. It's great to get you asking a question. He says, are Haugesund going down? I struggle to see 3 teams worse than them so far.
Yeah, thanks, David, for that. And he's not wrong. He's not wrong. And I'm very worried about Haugesund. First week against Sandefjord, they were absolutely shambolic. As bad as I've seen any team in a half of football in Eliteserien for quite a long time. They could have been 4 or 5 down. Now, they actually put in a better performance against Vålerenga at the weekend, lost 2-1. I mean, they couldn't have put anything worse in. But the big concern for me for Haugesund is how poor they look defensively. They are conceding chances left, right and centre. They can't win anything in the air at the back. They've conceded, I think, at least 2 headed goals and another goal which originated from a header. So if you've got a big lad up top, you are in business against Haugesund, because the loss of Benjamin Hansen is massive for them to Molde there. They're just not winning aerial duels enough. So it's a big concern. They did look better offensively against Vålerenga. They actually should have certainly scored more than 1 goal against them. Just some poor finishing. So the one hope for them is they might be able to sort of score the way out of trouble. And they've got an interesting match against Godset, who Godset are terrible away from home. So they might actually win the next game. But yeah, I am worried. Are they going down? Ooh, maybe. I'm thinking sort of the playoff spot area for them this year. And right now it doesn't look like there are 3 worse teams than them.
Yeah, in your preseason podcast, you tipped them to be 12th. You did actually say to me, funny enough, so it's a great question from David. You did actually say to me off air a couple of days ago, I think even before this weekend's round, you did say you worry about Haugesund. They look flat. So great minds think alike, as they say. So thank you so much, David, for that question. Let's move on. We got one from tipster Iluha, Iluhan87. Who I think is based in Berlin as maybe a betting analyst. He's asked who can beat Glimt. I mean, we can speculate about which teams can beat them, Steve. You've tipped Rosenborg to be second in the league. Just very briefly, like looking at upcoming games for Glimt. Obviously, they got that big match against Roma, which we've talked about already. And I know you've predicted them to win the league. If there's someone that can kind of stop them, let's say short term and long term, who could it be? Because next few games they've got Vålerenga at home, then they've got Viking away. You mentioned you quite like Viking, and then they've got Lillestrøm at home. In the short term, can anyone stop them? And obviously in the long term, can anyone stop them? And also, these Knutsen comments, could that rattle them a little bit?
I think they're going to have a bit of a rough spell in the league in the next few weeks. Certainly, if they get past Roma. They've got semi-finals to think about. They've got some tough matches. They've got Norwegian Cup semi-final against Viking, and I think they've got Viking in the league as well. They're going to lose a game somewhere in that run, probably multiple games. And I said this in the season preview podcast. It could be a bit of a difficult first third of the campaign for them, but then they'll start to get settled in the summer again. In terms of long term, who can beat them? Either of, I think, Molde, Viking, or Rosenborg could win the title this year. Certainly quite like what I've seen from Viking and Molde and Rosenborg. I think we're going to talk about them soon with some questions. Over the whole 30 games could accumulate quite a few points. So yeah, they could get beaten for sure, short and long term. But I think when all things said and done, settled down, that they will be getting that gold medal again.
I'll be honest, it's never a good sign when a manager starts talking about thinking about walking away from the game. That is a big statement, to be honest. That I've taken real notice of that. That is that's quite worrying, I think, for the just general mindset to go from that to sort of that. Is gives a bit of an insight, I think, into Knutsen's mind. So we'll learn a lot in the next few weeks, like you said. That'll be a bit of a worrying comment for Glimt fans, I would imagine.
I think the thing with Knutsen, he's not just about results and ruthlessness and stuff. I think he considers a lot of stuff on a human level. Football's not like the be-all, end-all. And I think that's what kind of rattled him with the Roma thing, and that he was shocked that, Mourinho would resort to such skullduggery. So, yeah, I think that it does kind of tell a lot about the person. He's been linked with clubs before, but he stayed very loyal. So I think there's very much a human element to Kjetil Knutsen.
Yes, indeed. I think worrying comments, but hopefully, everything will be all right. And like you said, been linked to clubs in the past. Maybe that explains to a certain extent. Does he want to be in somewhere like the Premier League, where it's like cutthroat environment, a bit more ruthless, if you know what I mean? Next question, Luis de Almeida. He's back, and he says Tobias Borky was one of Rosenborg's standouts in this first 2 rounds, and it looks like much of what will be their year will pass through his game. Can you see some positives in Rosenborg after such a disappointing last year? And I'm just going to tie that into another question, Steve, because I think we had another question about Borky, didn't we?
Yeah, Anto Burden.
Yeah, yesterday, in fact. Yeah, Anto Burden, Anto BRDN on Twitter. He was the first one in with his question, so thanks so much. What do you think about Tobias Borky? He looks very good, and I think he could be one of the best Rosenborg players this season. He's based in France, I believe, in Rouen. So what do you think about that?
What do I think about Rouen?
No. That's for another podcast. But yeah, let's stick to Borky in Rosenborg.
Yeah. I just want to add one more question onto that as well from CJ, Odin's Creation, the legend. Thoughts on RBK start to the season? Will this year be better than last for them? Well, in that season preview podcast, I did predict Rosenborg the dizzy heights of 4th. Now, I in many ways I've kind of not been impressed with them so far, but in many ways I have. They've kind of been what I thought they'd be. They're grinding out results. They're getting the results, and I certainly think it will be a better season for them. Whether they finish as high as second is a bit dubious now, but they could do over the 30-game season. As for Borky, well, remember he was known as this wonder kid at Stabæk and got sold off to Denmark, and it didn't really work out there. But Rosenborg did fork out, I think, £600,000 or £700,000 for him for his signing of him this winter. And he started with 2 good goals against Glimt, and I don't think we can expect that many goals from him. He's not known for his goal scoring ability, but there was a fantastic hit to equalise against Bodø Glimt. Really, what he's in that side for is to bring a bit of bite to that midfield, really, in a lot of different ways. Whether or not he's adapting to become like a box-to-box midfielder, that could happen, perhaps. I would say he's more of a, not anchor man before, but sort of a defensive midfielder who gets stuck in and is a good tackler. So, he's certainly bringing that bite to the midfield, but he seems to have more about his game nowadays than when he left the country initially, for sure. And he certainly could be one of the top players at the end of the season if he continues in this vein of form. And, I did say in that preview podcast that he will be a key man for Rosenborg this year. So, yeah, I mean, suddenly it's, Rosenborg get 4 points on the board, and a lot of their fans are coming out of the woodwork and enjoying life again. And why not? Because I think they are a bit disrespected this year. It's a very good squad on paper. They've got a new manager who's got to be given some time, and it might not be pretty, but I think they will have a strong mentality this year and grind out points.
Brilliant stuff. That was at Odin's Creation, wasn't it, as well?
Yes.
I believe he is the artist formerly known as Ted Cruz Ate My Son. So if you are, give us a comment, because we miss you. We miss you, Ted. And thanks very much for that question. I believe he's a Rosenborg fan. That pretty much wraps it up, I think. There's no other questions we missed, is there, Steve? I think
there's one more I want to answer from. It was from Chris Hilliam, who I did promise that I would. This was from like 2 weeks ago, who asked a question about Vålerenga. I'm going to read it out now. Any thoughts on Joachim Johnson, appointed sporting director at Vålerenga? How do you see that impacting Fagoma and the club in general? It was a very good question, because this guy was a prominent part of Eurosport Norway and quite prominent in that way. They were after someone in this department, and there were quite a few candidates that they looked at, but he was supposedly the outstanding candidate, who Fagoma himself approved of personally to work with. And obviously, these things are often said in statements, aren't they, that to make it look nice and rosy. But I certainly suspect that Fadugba is on board with it, and he's now got a big job to. I mean, sporting director is an interesting role. Exactly what do they do? I'm not entirely sure. Sometimes I think it's a bit of everything, isn't it? It's a bit of recruitment in terms of analysis in other ways as well. So I said they kind of maybe lacked a little bit of identity, didn't I, in the season preview podcast, and maybe he can help them regain some in a lot of different ways. I think it's a positive move, really, for them. It gives them kind of an injection of something which they maybe needed. And, they brought in Aaron Donham. And overall, I think it's definitely a positive move for Vålerenga. They might do a little bit better, perhaps, than I thought this year now. But, if they can get another couple of players in the summer window and start to progress, and maybe in terms of football philosophy as well, he can make a difference. Fadugba, I said, needed a little bit of modernising, and I think Johnson might give them that. So I'm optimistic for them with this appointment, Jonathan.
Brilliant stuff. That'll be all for this week's show. Grab us on patreon.com/Nordic Football Podcast if you want to grab our 10 to watches, and also the weekend betting preview. And also you can follow us on Twitter at Meatman Soccer. That's where you can find Steve, and you can find me on Twitter at JFFootball, JFFUTBOL. Give us a shout out also on Twitter and Nordic Footpod and the YouTube channel. Don't forget Nordic Football Podcast. Subscribe to the YouTube if you like it. We're getting a good decent amount of followers now, and some of the videos we're putting out this season will sort of help put the face to a name and that kind of thing. So I hope you've enjoyed the show, and that's pretty much it for this round. Keep an eye on Bodø Glimt Roma. That should be a great game, and we'll be back for another episode this time next week. So thanks a lot. Take care, everybody. And thanks for joining me, Steve, as well. Great to always have your company. Goodbye from me.
Yes, take care, everyone. Stay safe, and goodbye.